You're not going to read it. You know.
Thank you for joining us today for the discussion of why is vascular access so variable in the United States when the AVA's message meets the real world. Okay, and just so that you know, at the end of this, we will have the CE code, so please don't forget to write that down so you can unlock the survey to complete that for your CEs. If there's time after the presentation for questions, please go to the mics right in the middle here so we can hear your question nice and clearly. Now please let me welcome Jack Ladon and Adam Friedlander.
Thank you very much. Glad to see everybody late in the day. So today I'm going to be doing this talk with Adam Friedlander, and Simon Astor was supposed to be here, but his partner's having shoulder surgery, so he couldn't get away, right? The bias slide. Bias doesn't mean that it's wrong. Bias means that you're biased. I am clearly biased, okay? So how we met, during the pandemic, I was doing webinars and a bunch for HCA, and I was working with Mary Smith from CBC Healthcare at the time, right? And because I have procedural videos, my content is pretty well suited to the webinar format, live formats as well. But so a cat named Ray Golish, who's the chief medical officer at JFK in West Palm, saw my webinar and he said, okay, we need this guy. This is exactly our problem there. Now Ray is a spine surgeon and a PhD in data science. He's got to be the only guy in the country with those two, you know? So basically, Ray forced the medical staff to take the course. They had no, leadership. No, to quote Mary Smith, I mean, that's leadership, right? And as a speaker, you can tell how you're doing, you know, with the crowd, you know, but don't worry. I wasn't doing a long talk. I was only doing 2.5 hours, you know, for the people. And essentially, it was a room full of extended middle fingers, you know, for whatever reason, you know. So I mean, I'm at a hospital. I didn't know who was who in the room. Like most of you, I know. I have a pretty good idea. Hello, Elena. I didn't know who was in the room, and there was a guy in the back row that everybody was deferring to, you know. And eventually, he got up. He'd heard enough, and he got up and he told me what he thought of one of my points, you know, Adam. So say a little bit.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And most importantly, I want to thank Jack and the AVA for inviting me here today for this. I think more of a conversation. As you can tell, this is all absolutely true, and this is part of the story, I think, of how the real world message meets the AVA message meets the real world. And so I'm a nice guy. I've always been a nice guy, but I think that when we met, we didn't quite hit it off, and that's okay. That's okay, but that's part of I think that's part of the story of this and where I am today. And, you know, I'm not being humble. I'm being honest. Although I was, so I stood in the back of the room, and yeah. So here we were in the middle of the pandemic. I'm a pulmonary critical care trained intensivist. I was the ICU director at the largest highest acuity hospital in Palm Beach County. I'm now up here in Orlando. Moved up here 3.5 years ago. And Ray Golish, I think you described him the best. He is a cat, a very bright man, spine surgeon. We did have a CLABSI problem at our hospital. We didn't completely own it, but we did. And so Ray came across your message, and I think what it was is there was not a lot of description of who Jack was and why he was suddenly in the middle of, you know, the worst pandemic we were ever going to experience during our careers, knock on everything in this room. So I stood in the back of the room, a little defiant, which is not what I'm saying, which is not like me, but I'll blame the pandemic. It was a rough time for all of us, as you know. So I stood in the back of the room, and with the virtual middle finger was accurate. I think 2 points. One is you brought up the universal consent, and that's when I listened to him for a little bit. I didn't, you know, and I was thinking, not obnoxiously. I think I have a little bit of an ego. As I get older, it gets smaller and smaller, as Jack will attest to, which is a good thing. But I think also it was, is in the middle of the pandemic, as the ICU director, we were treading water on a good day, right? We all were, universally. And I was like, you know, who is this doctor, this surgeon? I did a little research, coming to my hospital to tell us how to do vascular access. Now, I didn't say that initially. I think when he got to universal consent, that's when I kind of had it. I said, okay, I raised my hand and said,
So
you can't do that.
right.
But the last point is although I had that virtual middle finger, I did know enough that, and I learned over time, you'll hear a lot of my quotes, Jack has become as much as a friend as a mentor, is although I was defiant, I did have a core inside of me that knew that the most important words in medicine are, the most dangerous words in medicine are, this is what we do things because this is how we've always done that. So I knew that in my core. So I settled myself down.
So, go ahead.
I listened to what Jack had to say.
Okay.
No, we're good. And that started our, I think a very good personal and professional relationship where I, listened to what the message was.
Right. So I'm going on and spout, and were you ever really proud of one of your ideas? They go like I really got it now, right? So basically, procedural consent in the intensive care unit. If that patient subsequently needs another vascular access procedure, it means another consent, right? But calling the family at 2 a.m. or ever try to get 2 doctor's signatures at 2 a.m. to do a bedside procedure? It's like, to me, it sounds ridiculous, So I came up with the LaDunn consent. So basically, when I consent somebody in the intensive care, I consent them for every procedure I might do for those patients, right? Huh? Like it so far? Then the stroke of genius came. So these are the procedures I listed, right? And then I put on there throughout the hospital stay. And I took the, typed it up, and I took it down to the print shop, and they printed me up 500 at a time. The one step I forgot or didn't know or bypassed was to go through the forms committee. I didn't exactly do this, but and I don't know.
And legal and risk and compliance. But apart from that, you did everything perfectly.
Like I'm always interested in what Russ Nassoff would think about, this kind of a thing, So Adam then subsequently moved on to ORMC, which is about the largest hospital in the country, And we were arranging a 3-day insertion course at ORMC, and I asked him, could we do, me, I want to do photos and videos, and he ran it up the flagpole, and legal said, sure, as long as you have a consent. Now, these are people on a ventilator with their lines already in. You're not going to get a consent from these people, right? So we're going in, so it kind of blew up my photo video plan, but we're walking into the ICU with Adam, me, my son Sean, Tom Petrie, Rob Dawson, the crew. We walk in, and I immediately asked the head nurse, can I see your consent form? And I said, no, man, look, we went through it. No, consent form, we went through this crap, you know what I mean? So they give me the consent form, and right on there is that they already had it on there, consent for photos and videos, you know what I mean? So we already had consent, and then he was snapping away, he was taking the pictures, so it was pretty cool. So today's topic, when the AVA message meets the real world. AVA's a bit of an echo chamber. You guys know me, you know what I'm gonna say, we read the same literature, we know the stuff like scrub the hub, get the tip, we know the principles of vascular access, right? And I am not a surrogate to speak for AVA on this matter, no matter what I think of myself, right? But on the task of attempting to influence MDs to change practice, I'm probably a pretty good choice, for that limited thing there. So what do I mean by the AVA message? What I mean is that there's an evidence-based, common sense-based way to practice vascular access. And we practice a certain way because we've been exposed to the leadership of this, the real world people. So what do I mean by the real world? Occasional line inserters. So I divide the world into vascular access professionals and the occasional line inserters. So the occasional line inserters I consider to be critical care, the emergency department, and anesthesiology, right? And it comes down to who reads the vascular access literature? We do. So it's a little bit we're inbred and all this sort of thing, right? But today the real world is represented by Adam Friedlander. Simon couldn't make it, and there's a hospital in my hometown that I consider to be the world epicenter of venous depletion because they've had intravenous heroin in that for 100 years. The community lived on intravenous heroin, and the patients came in without veins. So I consider that hospital to be the world epicenter of that, venous depletion. So basically, this is my depiction of the literature. So that's the literature, and this is practice.
So I want to comment briefly, I promise. See why we get along well. On my aha moment as a physician, like I said, I was defiant in for all things. But one, Jack seemed likable. He seemed likable. I mean, very was likable. But as a physician, my aha moment. So I calmed myself down. I listened to what he had to say, and that did. I think by not the end of the session, but at the end of the day, not that we were more than good. My aha moment that Jack presented us as physicians was something that I never encountered before, was to think about line maintenance at the time of insertion. And the anecdote, and you line up, a million intensivists, and if they don't share the same anecdote, they're all lying, is that we learned from, our mentors and other physicians. They never, thought of that. I saw good, mentors that I worked with in training and fellowship and beyond, where nurses would come to them and say, hey, I'm concerned about this dressing on the patient. And that physician would say, that's a nursing problem, and walk away. Not good. And so that was my aha moment. Although I was defiant, I at least was open to listening.
Show of hands. Has anybody seen dressings like the ones I just showed? Okay. Who doesn't like it? Why are we seeing this? We're the vascular access community. Why are we seeing this stuff? Somebody show me where this stuff is supported in the literature. Maybe the literature is not good enough. I personally think the literature has to be rewritten once people learn how to put in these catheters. That's where I am on this thing. And let me just say, Adam Friedlander is my white whale. I am never going to find somebody with his ego that's not in the way and believes in our message. I found it. I don't have to look for the next guy. And then the question's going to be, what's in between for you implementing the things that we're showing or that you believe in? Okay. So on change. So a couple of months ago, Christy Gaskell was doing a sponsored webinar, and I hijacked it. And we became a team, right? And some of the feedback we got from in that webinar was, the information is extremely valuable, and sharing with others is not necessarily receptive, as change is damaging to the very soul of some. It tells you how hard it is to initiate change in people that are doing something. Another comment we got from a nurse there was that the webinar gave me hope that placement of central venous catheters will change. My best dressing won't hold on a poorly placed line. And that's kind of the AVA message, put the catheters in properly, right? So everybody wants improved outcomes. There's exactly one way to get improved outcomes. You have to improve your process. It's the only way. You can want whatever you want, but if you want to improve it, right? Today, our focus is going to be on process, more like so than outcomes and statistics and Australian stuff, right? And the great Takashi Osada put it like this: if the process is right, the results will take care of themselves. So do it right, and you get what you get. All right. So the scientific, when Dr. Marcia Ryder described the scientific method, it came down something like this. You start with observations or facts. Then you form a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, and you come up with a theory. This is basically how it works, right? These are my observations, facts, if you will. Like they're telling me a story, like don't do this, right? Then this kind of stuff. And basically, when you walk out the door today, it's gonna be, that guy was saying a lot of stuff, you know what I mean? And it comes down to this. The ear is a bad place for addressing, and the chest is a good place for the dressing, right? So the problem as I see it, central lines are inserted suboptimally. You people will have your hands up, like it's not new to you. Like we should be like, but we're not. We see this stuff every day. So central lines are inserted suboptimally. The dressings aren't staying intact for 7 days. And the Never event occurred 250,000 times last year. Are these facts related? Good chance that they're related, right? So the question that we're asking here is, why do MDs insert suboptimally? We're going to focus on 3 domains today. One is philosophy of practice, and then insertion techniques and equipment, right? So what is your guiding philosophy regarding central venous access? This thing is rarely discussed and never written about, but we all have, philosophy of practice. And the people that I've honed mine on, Faisal Masood from Houston puts it like this: we have to make it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing. Yes. Dr. Pittarudi says we have to do the right thing for the patient and not what's convenient for us. And that implies that we'll change our practice if it's the right thing for the patient. Dr. Lin in San Francisco told me we have to avoid pneumothorax. That's a little different, And my guiding philosophy is this, that we want to standardize practice at the highest level because we work on human beings. And I always ask the audience, what do you get out of standardizing practice? Yeah, Rob Dawson, he can eliminate unnecessary variation. And what do you think unnecessary variation does to your outcomes? Nothing good. So what do MDs do or not do if avoiding pneumothorax is their guiding principle? They won't use the axillary vein. They'll use the jugular vein exclusively, and they'll stick it high in the neck. This is what you do if avoiding pneumothorax is your raison d'etre for this procedure, right? So Adam, why do MDs insert high in the neck? Their guiding philosophy, go ahead.
We didn't know any better. I wanted to share again, the real world anecdote on the pneumothorax story, for lack of a better word. So in my current role at Orlando Health, all our physicians have quality incentive metrics, which is a good thing, right? Quality bonus, and that we update every year. A couple iterations ago, so well before my time, because of not just my role, but my interest in vascular access, it was shared with me that the corporate director of rural care medicine, 2 iterations before me, very well intentioned. So the other thing is that sometimes things are well intentioned but go awry. One of the quality performance metrics for a year for the intensivist that year was pneumothorax rate. Seemed reasonable. What do you think happened when they made that an individual quality metric? No one, the intensivist didn't put in subclavian or axillary. The intensivist at that time didn't know about axillary, but did not put subclavian lines in, which still remain, again, I say axillary is extension of subclavian, literature-based, the safest lines for all the reasons everybody in this room knows. And so that was an unintended consequence. So they didn't have pneumothoraces, but they didn't have the best lines, best thing for the patient. And so that's where rural kind of hits what what the message in the literature says.
So why do MDs insert high in the neck? What's their guiding philosophy, right? Back to the World Epicenter of Venus. So I was lecturing there in March, and they kind of had a running dialogue with me. I didn't know who was lecturing, either me or them, but this is the principle number 1 for the internal jugular vein, low in the neck, and I consider that to be mandatory. We're going to standardize this at the highest level.
That's interesting because I was never taught like that.
I
I was always told to go high. I was always told to go high because I'm scared of the new one. Exactly. Yeah, well, you get more
I hope to get it before ultrasound.
before ultrasound. I used to put it high, but because we were scared of the new one.
Chlamydia is a bigger bad infection than pneumothorax will ever be. Okay. That's how the whole lecture went. You know what I mean? Yeah, right. So this is essentially the question. Why do MDs insert suboptimally?
We don't know better and we're not trained properly. Right?
Hypothesis, they're scared of pneumothorax, right? So like, why do I say this? And when I go to hospitals, I talk to doctors, but I came up in the system. When I was a resident doing this, the only thing we heard about was pneumothorax. They paid for CLABSI. CLABSI wasn't a thing when I was training, and if you had an arterial injury, you might have a mortality morbidity conference, and that would be the end of it. But like, this was the thing. This is the only thing that you heard about. You were trying to avoid pneumothorax, right? Is the fear of pneumothorax rational? So I want to compare pneumothorax versus CLABSI, right? And we're going to look at the following. Morbidity, mortality, extend the length of stay, the cost of prevention, and the scarlet letter. The morbidity of pneumothorax caused in the hospital in sterile conditions is minimal. And the morbidity of CLABSI is extreme. Endocarditis, brain abscess, prosthetic hip infection. We don't even talk about the morbidity because of the mortality issue. The mortality of pneumothorax caused in the hospital should approach zero. I won't even elaborate on that. But the mortality for CLABSI in all the long studies is 12 to 25%. If you're scared of CLABSI, you're scared of the wrong thing, right? Extend the length of stay. Some of the papers I read, it's 4 days. I just read a paper from the Mayo Clinic, it's 22 days. Imagine you're in the hospital for an extra 22 days because you have a bloodstream infection. No wonder it's a fortune, you know, the cost. Pneumothorax is expensive. You may have to go to a nasty surgeon and he'll help you out with a chest tube. CLABSI is ridiculously expensive, and that $45,000 number is 10 years old, right? And prevention. The prevention of pneumothorax is straightforward. If you can do this, you are not going to get a pneumothorax. But the prevention of CLABSI is complex. You know what I mean? The nurse invades that line 25 times a day. You got to do the tubing change, the clamping sequence, scrub the hub, all that cool nursing stuff, right? And then there's the scarlet letter. If I caused a pneumothorax in Baltimore, you'd know about it in Orlando. The word would be out. Oh, LaDunn caused another pneumothorax, you know? But like, for CLABSI, who caused it? Like, that was 5 days ago. Yeah, anybody ever seen an anesthesiologist claim credit for CLABSI? No, and you never will, right? And then the treatment for pneumothorax is a technical treatment for it. You can observe the patient a lot of times, or you do this.
The 50 pounds of space, mid-axillary line, anterior axillary line. I'm okay. Look at mom.
Nobody's ever liked the chest tube. But the treatment for CLABSI, number one, you remove the line. Patient needs a new procedure, antibiotics, organ support. Like, it's a whole, there's no technical treatment for CLABSI. It's a process, right? So the philosophy, we have to avoid pneumothorax at all costs, right? So the internal jugular vein runs from the mandible to the clavicle, right? And inserting high in the neck is a passive technique to avoid pneumothorax. The further you are from the lung, the less of a chance, of damaging. You can do it, don't get me wrong, but it's a passive technique.
So Adam, where were you in training at this point? Where's your head?
You saw how right not mine. And so I wanted to add to that. So the reason why this is occurring is physicians are don't know better and aren't trained correctly. And so I'll share my anecdote for this. Well, I was a third-year resident at the University of Colorado when so this was 2003, 2004. So, relatively speaking, not that long ago. Yes, 20 plus years ago, but relatively speaking, in the scheme of time in medical education, not that long ago, when the first generation of bedside point-of-care ultrasound was introduced as internal medicine residents, right? The anesthesiologist had some, and they rolled. I remember it like it was yesterday. They rolled us this POCUS machine. It was the original version of a site right. Guess how much training we had as residents with that? That's none. Zero. When I say zero, they rolled this site right in. It looked like bad radar on a good day. And they said, start putting lines in. I put in hundreds and hundreds of IJs primarily because of the fear of pneumothorax, blindly, oh my goodness, but that was before, POCUS. So we were excused, but we had zero training. We just had to figure it out, and that was medical education. And so not to, is the hope for the future is that our residents and fellows now are growing up with this technology. So there is hope for the future.
So what's the drawback of a high insertion? It leads to a crummy, disrupted dressing. And what people have to realize, the other end of that catheter is in the heart. Like we see this, but the other end of it's in the patient's heart, right? So basically, when you walk out of here, the ear is a bad place for dressing, the chest is a good place for the dressing, right? So the pneumothorax, it's a trigger. Like, oh, what about pneumothorax? It's like a trump card. Like, you ever have a doctor bring up pneumothorax to you? Like, what are you going to say to him? Oh, don't be scared of pneumothorax. But I can do it, right? But I think the question has to morph into, what can we do to prevent pneumothorax and maintain a proper dressing? Like, if we just leave it at the pneumothorax, we're going to wind up with a mess, right? So, and to me, this is the main question, right? Learn to follow your needle through the tissue. But you don't have to go by the mandible or the ear. You can go like right above the clavicle, right? So it's an active measure. Following the needle is a technical way to prevent pneumothorax. If you can follow that needle, you're not going to get pneumothorax, maybe none throughout the rest of your career, So our observation, we're trying to build a scientific method here, is that MDs are deathly afraid of pneumothorax, mostly because it's attributable to them, right? And I mean, Mom, there's a monster under my bed fear. This isn't like, show me one more paper, show me the randomized. No, they're scared. Like, it's fear, they're scared, right? So I want to discuss generational fear a little bit. It's like what Adam was saying. They're trained by somebody that's scared of pneumothorax, right? So that person, he's going to be scared of pneumothorax. Suppose he goes on to become the director of the ICU. He's training people to be scared of pneumothorax. So what are they going to do? Go high in the neck, not use the chest. So where are we in this process? We're 50 years in. This is, how they say it's hard to change the culture of an institution? This is 50 years that we're doing this thing, right? So CLABSI's a bigger, badder complication than pneumothorax will ever be. Like, what's the major problem with pneumothorax? It's attributable to you, right?
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Fear is irrational. Like, it's not one more paper, an Andrew Bullmore paper. Oh, Andrew just wrote the greatest paper, right? So we talk about a proper insertion. I consider a proper insertion to be the following: minimal attempts, hopefully one. We want the tip close to the cavo-atrial junction. You probably didn't hear about that, or it's not a religion. Tell me about tip getting at the cavo-atrial junction.
Well, it's kind of the same theme. And a lot of what you'll hear from me, yes, I learned from Jack because I settled down and paid attention and realized that this is about patient care, which is the most important thing. During training, we were taught to look at the on X-ray cranioaxial junction, atrial junction. Sorry. But learned over time, really listening to Jack in literature, that's probably not deep enough to avoid a thrombotic risk.
And it comes down to, would you fix it if it wasn't at the cavo-atrial junction? How many anesthesiology or critical care people would fix a catheter if it wasn't in the right spot? All right, don't answer that. Wait, we need a proper exit site. We need sutureless securement. We need antimicrobial protection. We want the dressing to stay on 7 days without disruption. Once I've done that, that's when I use the term proper insertion. That's what I'm talking about, right? But what are the hurdles? What's in between doing it the AVA way? Like what gets in between the mess on the neck and the way we do it, right? So it's like knowledge. If you don't know you can do it this way, you wouldn't expect somebody to do it that way, right? It's how we've always done it. That's a big hurdle. We're 50 years into that's the way we've always done it, right? Training, it's related. They're training people in this way. Like, I'll get into that a little bit. You ever see some doctors have a toxic ego? Did anybody ever see that? Not my man. Not my man. He's getting, the attending staff. How are you going to train the residents to do it one way? As soon as they have a problem, the attending, I told you not to do that crap, you know? And then fear, as we've gone into, like, these are the things that are in the way. Back to the epicenter.
All of your intentions are valid and recognized, but I mean, maybe, and I haven't done the research for sure, but we don't have a class C epidemic anymore.
Whenever I hear that, I always ask, what got it? Usually, people don't know. I mean, you don't know, everything. You know, it's a process, that kind of thing. All right, so has anybody that travels to hospital, anybody hear this? It's a ubiquitous observation. We don't have a CLABSI problem. Anybody hear that? Anybody hear that, right? And but when I go to these places, I find a poor process. At that hospital, the first patient I went to see, I get myself to round, if they do. The first person we saw had a line going down to the groin, with nothing running through it, through the three. She had a nicely placed back of the hand IV. So I guess they were going to take this out. And by the way, she had a large panniculus. So panniculus is abdominal tissue that hangs down over the thigh, and she's got a central line now that's covered by her abdominal tissue. And by the way, she had a colostomy in the panniculus. So I'm sure you don't get CLABSIs with a process like that. I was with IPs. We try to page surgery to come and listen to what Dr. LeDun had to say about this, which wasn't going to be particularly kind. But this is what people tell you. They don't have a CLABSI problem, and you walk around and they're like, well, there's a panniculus with a colostomy in it. Three domains, right? Philosophy of practice, I think we covered pretty strongly, and it's, you're going to have to listen. You're not going to find anything written about that. All right. So the axillary vein technique, training, of course, back to the world epicenter, right? Between those ones on the left side and these nice optimal ones on the right side, what is in between? And this is kind of getting to the heart of these little side conversations, right? So knowledge. I mean, if somebody doesn't know you can do it this way, there's no way you can
I was about to put it anymore. Just putting back, are you putting something negative back there?
Okay, stick with me, okay, a little bit. Hey, this is what you were telling me. Well, we've always done it this way, right?
We used to know all the guys.
Training, what happened?
It's nice to see that I wasn't the only one.
But I'm trying to lecture. This is the chief of surgery. You got to be respectful. He's a knowledgeable guy, right? So the chief of surgery is telling me, "Are we back to subclavians?" I didn't know we left. What do you mean? What do you mean? Are we back? Nobody clued me in. Right? But what does it tell you? See, this is my gift. What does this statement tell you? If the chief of surgery is asking this question, this institution and many others is not teaching this procedure. If he's asking me this, right, and that hurts my soul. No, honestly, that's where, for my family, that's where the line is going to be, right? And so then what percentage of critical care fellowships are teaching ultrasound-guided axillary vein? A friend of mine, I met him at a wedding recently. He's a fellow at Cleveland Clinic. He says they have to go around the attending staff. So it's not, talk about standardizing procedure. They have to do it when the attendings aren't there if they're going to do it. And I said, what percentage of critical care fellowships are training on this? He said less than 10%, but I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
I would guess it's maybe lower than that.
Yeah.
That's an opinion. I don't have any evidence base for that, but
right.
It's good opinion. Yes, I would have guessed 5%.
So
best.
the AVA message meets the real world. AVA message, put it in the axillary vein. Real world, well, we don't do that, Are we back to subclavian? I was like, are we back to subclavians? What's the chance that an inserter learns this technique outside of his training? No, he's trained by somebody who's scared of pneumothorax. You're not going to do this. You're not going to learn this outside of training. Once you're comfortable with the jugular vein. Okay. All right, there are many things we disagree about in the field of vascular access. We agree about this. The optimal location for the dressing is the chest. I got some literature up there. Tim Spencer's on there. Ostroff, Dawson, Mauro Pittaruti, right? And this is what, so they came up with the red, yellow, green system. The neck is red, supraclavicular, if you have to go there, is yellow, and the chest is green, right? This is what it looks like. So Jean-Francois Timsit, the famous French intensivist that we quote all the time about this stuff, in 2002, he wrote about an 8-page editorial asking the question, is the subclavian vein the royal root? Timsit didn't answer his question, but I will. It is. It is. That's where the dressing's supposed to be. The dressing will stay on. The little patch thing will work. You know, like, yeah, it is the royal root. You know, so what's the evidentiary basis for using the axillary vein? Here's the CDC, here's the Shea Compendium, and here's the Society of French Intensivists. Timsit is the lead author, right? This is, this paper initiated percutaneous central venous access. Robert Aubagnac in 1952 wrote up his experience during World War II in the Italian campaign, right? And this is Aubagnac's procedure.
Chest is a better strength to me, although she's got subcutaneous emphysema, which will preclude the ultrasound visualization of her axillary vessels. You can see the puffing right here going down. See that?
Laura, climax or O? Which climax or O? Which?
Where blind sticking is better than ultrasound guided. More sensitive.
Because there's gas in the sub-Q and you can't see through the gas, right?
So there we have
Like-
the subclavian venipuncture blind. We try to insert the J-wire.
So I grew up doing that procedure. I love that procedure. I have a physiologic response when I get that needle in the vein and I get some blood back. But like, I won't do it. I won't do it, right? Like, if you use ultrasound guided axillary vein, you get a lot of advantages, but you get two main ones. Number one, you assess the vein for suitability, and you can see your needle going through the tissue down to the vein, something like this. And I apologize if you guys have seen these videos. They're my best ones, but stick.
It's a nice axillary vein.
The axillary vein.
We're going to be puncturing our axillary vein inside of the humeral head in the deltopectoral groove. I'll tell you to be quiet, okay? Wheel on the way out. That's staying, ma'am?
Bedside manner.
You have to learn how to talk to doctors and patients, you know? There's my needle inside the axillary vein. The artery to the left, the pleura is below.
Then when you push down, just get it through with the 20 centimeters. So we're going to make a back traction. Threading the catheter over the wire.
We don't believe in cutting the skin as the natural barrier to infection.
All right. So, okay, there's our blue bullseye. So you see, we're right in the deltopectoral groove, right where we marked it. We're doing it.
Van, where are you right now? In training.
Well, once again, I was going to comment on not making the skin, as Jack's yelling at the patient.
All right, so we're put on the device.
Because I listened, so until Jack was the first one to say that was blasphemy, right? That's how we train.
So
And
here we have an ultrasound guided right axillary.
extending why, again, I don't know exactly the percent of fellowships that are training it correctly, but I have a sense. Is that if you go to a residency and fellowship program, luckily now we have checklists that they have to go through for vascular access, which is good. Checklists are great. I didn't have checklists, right? We have, here's a kit, go put a line in. That's really how we learn. We have checklists. If you look at that checklist, step number 17 is, guess what? Nick the skin. Still on there, right? So that is, we again, going back to the generational fear and generational misinformation is still out there. And so that was probably convincing my team after Jack left, once I, paid attention and spent some more time with Jack, is the biggest barrier to overcome is getting our, the intensivists who their entire careers had nicked the skin because that was drilled into them from an early age, just like it was probably the biggest barrier. And still is a big barrier.
In that video, I showed a tip locating confirmation. You're my white whale. You believe in it. I know you don't have it instituted. So, the hurdle, why don't we have why don't we have intraprocedural tip location in Orlando Regional? Why don't we have that?
No, fair question. Some of my answers are going to sound like they're your answers because they are, and because I've listened and we talk a lot over time. It's because supply chain is in charge of ordering equipment. And once again, something you've heard from Jack 1,000 times. That's become part of my mantra is that when there's nobody in charge of vascular access, there's nobody in charge of vascular access. I'm not just being self-serving. Orlando Health, we have an outstanding, and I know it's a little bit of an vascular access team and nurses. But in terms of who's actually in charge of vascular access at my organization, we're not sure. And that's true for a lot of organizations. That's why it's hard to standardize these things at the highest level.
That's the real world. That's the real world telling us nobody's in charge of vascular access. All right, I made a case for the ultrasound-guided axillary vein. It's not fear. It's risks and benefits. There's no fear. I'm not scared of it. It has a risk and it has benefits. Right? So what's the risk? All right, a chance of pneumothorax. What's the benefit? The dressing will stay intact and have a decreased chance of CLABSI because of having a dressing intact. To me, the benefit far outweighs the risk. It's not even close. That's my go-to line unless they have kidney disease, right? So what can we do to prevent pneumothorax and maintain an intact dressing? Follow your needle down through the tissue, down into the vein. You're not going to get pneumothorax, And it's a technical solution. What I mean by that, it's in my hands, it's in our hands to prevent pneumothorax. If you can follow the needle through the tissue, you're not going to get pneumothorax, right? So there's a technical method to prevent pneumothorax. Learn to follow your needle, right? And if you can't follow your needle, you probably shouldn't be doing this, right? There's a technical method to treat pneumothorax. You put in a chest tube. It's in our hands to do it. There's nothing like that for CLABSI. There's no technical. CLABSI is a process. There's no technical prevention or treatment for CLABSI, but there is for pneumothorax, right? All right, moving on from the axillary vein, we're going to get into the IJ vein module. And so I was at a hospital 2 years ago for 3 months because of their CLABSI issue. The chief medical officer said to me, heads were going to roll if they didn't get CLABSI under control. And I think he meant his head was going to roll if he didn't get it under control, right? So I'm in there, and so the intern's is going to put in a dialysis catheter. I said to the assistant director of the ICU, either you're going to scrub in with this guy or I'm going to scrub in with this guy. I mean, he needed supervision. And the MICU attending, intelligent guy just out of his fellowship a couple of years, said, no, we don't have the bandwidth to train the residents, to do hands-on training. Like, who's supposed to do it? Buddy, training residents and fellows is your job, whether a drop mic. I mean, whether you realize it or not, like, I'm sorry, like, what is this? Like, who's going to do the training? The guy that learned last month? Like, you want to jump in on this, or let me keep ranting? All right.
No.
All right. Hold on.
Well, I did want to comment on the hope for the future. I think our current residents and fellows. It's a little bit of a side tangent. It's all related. Are really good at ultrasound guided peripheral IVs. And I say that because the last session we went to was there's a great presentation from New York Presbyterian on ultrasound guided peripheral IVs. I'm saying this because I am preaching the choir, but it's true. As a physician, I've done hundreds during training pre-POCUS of blind, which I'll never do, central lines. And I've done thousands and thousands of ultrasound guided central lines. I went through training for ultrasound guided peripheral IVs. It's hard. And I know you say, well, everything's hard if you don't have training, but it's really hard. It's and having a physician who says, well, I put central lines in all the time, it's a completely different technique. Our residents, fellows, and most importantly, and I'm not just doing this, our APPs, are outstanding at ultrasound-guided peripheral IVs because they've grown up with it, right? They start as medical students learning to put them in. So a lot of times when we're called as the intensivist team to vascular access on the floor, and the VAC team isn't available, or it's the middle of the night, for emergent central line, the residents or APPs go up there and they get an ultrasound-guided peripheral IV. That's great. I think that's a key difference in training.
Back to the World Epicenter.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the training course is different. And that's the HAC course, so you need this course.
Like, there's been a lot of advances over the years, but if we don't, like, nobody's in charge, like.
Yeah, the course doesn't teach the posterior approach. They teach the stick high.
Head of the bed, high and neck, straight line into the. And the point is that it gives the nerve something suboptimal. If you do that, the nerve, like. Have they ever done a vehicle?
So they really didn't want to do this too much, did they?
No.
Does that ever come up in the course?
No, because the day to get it in.
Yeah,
The problem.
yeah,
It's mine to do someone else's job.
yeah, exactly.
So like with this thing, like we don't have to imagine what's going through the doctor's head, they're telling us. That's the point of this talk, really. So what do MDs do or not do if avoiding pneumothorax is a guiding principle? They use the IJ vein exclusively. They go high in the neck, right? So of my 16 recommendations, number 2 is where we're going to place these central venous catheters, right? For those of you who have been doing your radical neck dissections, that's the internal jugular vein. What's my beef with the jugular vein? It's the most popular site on the planet, right? If I walk through your intensive care unit, I guarantee I'd see some internal jugular action, right? What's the problem with the internal jugular vein? There are too many ways to do it poorly. It's not inserted in standardized fashion, and you get unnecessary variation. What do you think unnecessary variation does to your outcomes, right? So, for example, you could put it high in the neck, you could put it in the middle of the neck, and you could put it low in the neck. Vascular access experts, where do you want it? Low in the neck. Anything else, any place else is not standardized at the highest level. You can do it, but it's not standardized at the best level. LeDun, IJ vein principle number 1 is low in the neck, and I consider this to be mandatory if we're going to standardize this practice at the highest level, right? All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the catheter and dressing as a unit, right? Because if you don't have a catheter, you don't need a dressing, right? And the catheter has to exit from the dressing. You can't just coil it up like a snake under the dressing because the nurse can't use it, right? So basically, here's an IJ catheter, right? And it can exit from the dressing, north or south, east or west. If the catheter exits from the east side of the dressing, you can get a configuration like this. And I have to say, this is my favorite slide. Somebody that was smart enough to graduate from medical school, put the dressing on the patient's mouth, widely described as the dirtiest part of a human being. And like you demonstrated you have a certain amount of intelligence, and then you do this. Where in the literature does it support this, right? Or you can have the catheter come out the west side of the dressing. You might get a configuration like this. Hey, buddy, the hub's supposed to be on the dressing. That's how we did it in Brooklyn, The classic is the doctor goes to the head of the bed and directs it upward, and you get what my son affectionately calls the mess on the neck, right? Or the other way to do it is to have it come out the south side, right? So what's the goal again? Standardizing practice at the highest level, right? Eliminate unnecessary variation. Vascular access experts, which configuration standardizes practice at the highest level? Anything else is not. And the doctors in the audience, it's going to kink. It's going to kink. I'm waiting for my first kink. I love being told stuff by people that don't do the procedure. That's my favorite. Well, gee, I've done it 7,200 times. I'm waiting for my kink, So IJ vein principle number 2 is rotate it downward. Principle number 1 is low in the neck. I come from the side of the bed. I don't consider that to be mandatory, but that's the way I do it and that's the way I teach it. So this is what I'm talking about.
Pull this thing down toward the chest, not up near the ear. Okay, I do not want this dressing up near the middle of the neck. I want it down toward the chest.
9 minutes.
Where it belongs. I'm going to put it on with the slit facing the catheter, and we're going to offset it at just a small amount, maybe about 10 degrees. And the catheter, all right, we're going to do the skin prep. Okay, so we're going to take off the rest of it.
You can do it 10 other ways. You want to standardize at the highest level, that's how you do it, right? So, of course, the dressing must be changed, but you have to ask why. Yeah, otherwise, you can change it on this shift, you can change it next shift, you can change it twice on the shift after that. You have to ask why. All right, because the catheter exits from the north side of the dressing. Gravity grabs the tails and pulls it toward the floor and disrupts it, right? See, gravity, and the patient I just showed, the tails are coming out the bottom of the dressing. Gravity's working with you, right? Gravity is the inexorable attraction of the heavenly bodies for one another. It's not a statistical inference where you need an Australian to interpret what that is, right? It's a physical constant as described by Sir Isaac, right? Back to the epicenter. If you find something like this, what do you have to do? Yeah, I can change the dressing, fine. But you have to ask, why is it disrupted? Yes. The catheter exits to the top of the dressing. Gravity grabs the tails and pulls it toward the floor. The patient I just showed, the tails are coming out the bottom of the dressing, and gravity's working with you. You can fight gravity. You can fight gravity because somebody trained you to go to the head of the bed and direct it upwards. Go ahead. But the dressing's not going to stay intact. If you don't think the dressing is important, do it that way, right?
Adam, what do you have to say about this part? Where were you right here?
No, I've seen these. That was a tough time you had there at the hospital. To be honest, what I'm thinking, it might makes our introduction look mild. No, change is hard, and when you have the chief of surgery at the hospital there questioning best practices, it's challenging.
So moving on. Jonah, stand up for a second. Jonah, up. Stand up for a second. This is the great Jonah Caparis, and she got recruited to Mount Sinai Medical School in New York, and she invited me in to see what was going on there. And we're going in to see a patient. They were going to put in a line. They have a beautiful line room out in the ICU, and it's staffed by an OR tech, so it looks good. If there's no, anyway. I was on the way in, and I said to them, by the way, I got my video camera with me. I know you're not going to let me. Yeah, sure, go ahead, So now you have somebody from outside the institution with a video camera and an unstable personality. Like, what can go wrong with this?
In Jonah's presentation, when I was referring to from the last session on ultrasound-guided peripheral IV, not to bring it full circle, but that was an outstanding presentation. But share, the one physician in your cohort that learned how to do ultrasound-guided peripheral IVs, how many do they do? None, right? 0. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
They're hard,
but
it's hard.
So I'm on the way in to view this procedure at the medical school in New York City, right across from Central Park. And I consider this how not to do a jugular vein, right? They start at the head of the bed. Where's the dressing going to be when the physician starts at the head of the bed? North. You learned the IV lady. They did use ultrasound. Otherwise, this was like Brompton's Hospital, London, 1969. No micropuncture equipment.
And I remember every IJ I had done up until meeting Jack, I had always done at the head of the bed. And I remember having a conversation. It was near blasphemy when he said, "Well, you can do it from the side." Can you? Because it was ingrained in my DNA.
You see the
because of people that trained me is that we always did it at the head of the bed. You go in the OR, the anesthesiologist do it at the head of the bed.
Yeah, it just leads to a crummy dressing. So, I thought he was going to dilate without cutting the skin, but he makes a little nick. Yeah, it warmed my heart, but he makes a little nick. No big deal. No big deal, right? But like, watch, he's going to be moving the ear out of the way. We don't want to see the ear.
And
Oh,
Hub did.
well, he pulled it back. Oh, like, let's suture down nice and tight. You know what I mean? Like. That's not the worst. No, I don't use heparin. So,
We stopped using heparin routinely, what, 20, 25 years ago?
so I told a fellow nice work, but I didn't mean it. You know what I mean? It was like, so what's wrong with the dressing? Ivy lady, what's wrong with the dressing? It's west. The catheter's exiting from the west side, and it's near the ear. Like, it's wrong. It's wrong. It's not standardized, right? This is how you do an IJ.
Puncture the vein as low down above the clavicle.
Coming from the side of the bed, low in the neck. Rotate it down. Micropuncture equipment. No skin incision. If you can do that, you're not going to get pneumothorax. You don't have to be scared of pneumothorax. Can you see the video? I'm not turning down the lights at this point. Okay.
Now the wire, see that, we're nice and low in the neck, we're not in the middle, we're gonna put the 5 French micro introducer over the 0.18 inch wire. Okay. We're not going to cut the skin. The skin is the barrier to infection. This feels like it's going through the inner cannula and the wire. So put a finger over the hole from the set.
I'm just going to move on from that. All right, so low internal jugular vein, right? Like, there's no fear. It has risks and benefits. What's the risk? Proximity to the lung, probably increased chance of pneumothorax. But if you can follow it, right, then what's the benefit? An intact dressing, decreased chance of CLABSI. For me, the benefit far outweighs the risk, this fear of pneumothorax, right? What can we do to prevent a pneumothorax and maintain an intact dressing? Learn to follow your needle through the tissue. I'm just going to go a little quick here. I want to get to the end. All right, 3 domains: philosophy of practice, insertion techniques, equipment. I made a mistake with these people at the World Epicenter. I demonstrated upgraded equipment, so gave them the excuse, oh, wow, you have that. You can do all these procedures with the regular equipment, but that's what they focused on.
I think we can all do what you suggested, just the practice of it. I mean, we all do that insertions. You're suggesting replacement. We can manage it if we have the.
Yeah, all right. So like, I should have demonstrated techniques with standard equipment, right?
So anyway,
We have one size.
all right. Tell your manufacturer, give you different sizes, all right. Phase 2.
So like only one catheter. Many, it's a red flag. You go to these they have one catheter, right? It violates the AVA principle. We want to use the smallest device with the minimal number of lumens, right? That is for the job, right? The patients come in different sizes. The catheter should come in different sizes, right? So basically, we had in my hospital, we had a single lumen, a double lumen, and a triple lumen for 20 centimeter, 25, and 30. So we had 9 devices, right? And like, I didn't come down on December 25th down to the tree and find them there. They weren't there. No, we worked for them. We asked for them. They don't cost anymore. You know what I mean? But it's a red flag if they only have one catheter. Everybody gets 3 lumens whether they need it or not, right?
What were they, 16?
20. It's usually 20 triple lumen. We only have one catheter. They don't have, micropuncture kit, EKG-based diplocate. They're so far behind if you don't adopt this stuff. Who reads the vascular access literature? Not these guys, Sutureless securement. Like, they're wedded to sutures, right?
Well, just think about also as well. One, they shouldn't get, try to be as sterile as possible. So the kit that we have already comes with suture and built into it. That comes with so you already are
Grades of sterile.
Kind of
I'd like to be a little
All
practice.
right. So, people, Like, why do they use sutures? Yeah, because they're in the kit. Why do the manufacturers put sutures in the kit? Because they use them. It's a big fat circle of illogic, right? So problems. The state of acute vascular access. See if you can pick up the deviation from optimal technique. It's subtle. It's subtle. See if you can pick it up.
It's got to be an anesthesiologist.
Surgeon.
Surgeon? Oh, even better.
Yeah. We don't have a Clabsy problem. No, this is my hospital. This is my hospital. I'm standing there with a video camera like an idiot, watching the magic. I got there in the middle of the procedure. No, this is. Did anybody see the defect? Did anybody see the deviation, right? All right, so fear of pneumothorax is not a good reason to make a mess on the neck. Fear of pneumothorax, it's psychopathy, right? You need a shrink. If you're scared of it, how are you going to overcome your fear? Go to your psychologist. Like, nobody's in charge of vascular access. It's the primary cause of this stuff, right? Purchasing becomes in charge of equipment. Training is poor to non-existent, and they're blaming the residents. Here's the chief of surgery. I'm going to bring this in. He doesn't want the residents fooling around. You're supposed to train the residents to do the right thing, Solutions. Appointed director of vascular access. We're going to finish. For training and equipment. Fear of pneumothorax. You need psychological counseling. Like, it's not just going to go away. It's learn to follow the needle with ultrasound. Empower the APPs and the RNs to insert and to train the residents. Yeah. I want to thank you for your attention. Judy won't let us take questions, but we'll be around. I really appreciate you guys being here. It's late in the day, and thanks for coming. Yes?
Submitted an application in your name to join commission in DMV.
Oh, DMV?
Yeah, so they're to accrediting body since classes are never event.
Yeah.
You're going to be on their team to go to every hospital and reprimand them.
All right. All right, good. Thanks, Chip.
That was great.
Thanks. All right.
What's that? They'll figure it out.
4971. Code 4971.
Physician, and I've learned on my own to put in axillaries.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Right. Me too. There's nobody to treat. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it outside their training, especially if they're trained by somebody that's scared. Because that's the brainwashing.
The problem you have is they need enough experience.